I do have a special guest for you guys. Yes, a very, very special guest. I'm really excited to talk to this gentleman. Uh, to be honest, I'm in love with his football mind, right? He's one of the smartest guys I know in this thing. He's somebody that I tend to rely on when I need someone to make sense of what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, right? I'm more so on the passionate side of the game, right? I give you guys a lot of raw emotion, a lot of raw energy. This brother, this man, way more steady, way more even kill. Can't wait to bring him on. Let's not waste any time. This man does great work on his own YouTube channel, Gate City Sports. His name is Steve Hyder. Some of you guys call him Stat Sheet Steve. Gates, how you feeling, my man?
What's good, Tone? It's been a long time, man. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, man. I can't complain that one bit. It's so cool to talk to you at this point, especially because you and I haven't spoken, I think, since what, the beginning of the season, or was it just before the season started? I can't quite remember exactly.
It was just before the season started, and I gave you the hot take of the Saquon Barkley thing, where you asked me who would benefit the most for Saquon Barkley, and I told you Kenneth Gainwell.
It's so funny. A lot has happened since then. A lot has happened. Some highs, some lows, some even better highs. And Gates, the Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Super Bowl champions, man. I mean, obviously, we're going to get into a lot of the stuff going on in the offseason, but I got to ask you, right? When you think about how this season went, you watched every game week after week after week. All the varying narratives that came out about this team, how they developed their game plan and how they developed, their course of action, right? Their plan of action throughout the season. When you think about how they won this Super Bowl, how they got to this point, just walk me through the things that you were experiencing throughout this season with this team.
So I think the 2024 version of the Philadelphia Eagles is like from the coaching perspective, right? It's when we go into these camps, I taught mostly and coach mostly at the middle school and the high school level. We always talk about like forming an identity as a team, forming that core nucleus. Like everybody, you got the high school level, it's like, close to 30, 40 kids together. NFL level, you got 53 on active, you got 16 practice squad roster guys, right? Plus you got some veterans you keep on the phone. So you got all these different people coming together for a common goal. And it don't always work, right? We saw that in the 2023 Philadelphia Eagles. That didn't come together. They didn't come to fruition. But the 2024 version, I thought, like, exemplified what that means, right? Mm-hmm. When those guys were serving the greater good, the greater cause, they put aside their personal benefits. They put aside their personal numbers in order to accomplish something great for everybody together there, right? I mean, Jalen, when that was probably sold to him and pitched to him, and they're telling him, like, there's just no way you're going to get to 4,000 yards with this structure. You know what I mean? I'm sure that there's a part there that has to go like, oh, man, I'm going to have to deal with this crap. Like, come on, man. You got AJ, you got Devontae. They're telling them, they're probably like, oh, man, like, even though AJ almost still got 1,400 yards, if we're going to be real about it, if he had played all the games, he would have gotten it. But, there's going to be a detraction somewhere, right? Think of your Dallas Goedert. When am I going to see a target? Like, you know what I mean? Imagine you're a guy you're in a bad situation in Washington, and you're told, like, oh, you're going to a Super Bowl contender, but it's Philadelphia with Saquon.
It's crazy. It's just crazy, Gates.
John. Like, I thought that they exemplified what that meant to be like a team, like the team aspect of it, like the commonality of that single goal. And like, hey, as Jalen said once before, money's nice, championships are better. Stats are nice, the ring is better.
Bro, it's so funny to me because you have so many personalities on this team. You have so many guys that are Pro Bowlers, all pros, guys that are good and great in their own right, guys that have experienced their own fair share of success. You have those guys in the building, but then you have this balancing act with the younger guys, the rookies, the second year, the third year guys, right?
Yep.
And one of the things that stood out to me about this team was just how young they were, or how young they were, especially on the defensive side of the ball, right? And I know we touched on that offense, but I want to jump over to the defense if we can, because I think the defense, outside of Saquon being Saquon, right, and Jalen Hurts being more amicable to the game plan, on offense. But I feel like the story of the season was defense, because I think when we spoke last, at least, we were just hoping for an average defense based off of where they were in 2023. They were essentially dead last in most meaningful categories in 2023. 2024 comes, you bring in Vic Fangio, you draft Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo, you draft Cooper DeJean out of Iowa, you draft Jalen Hunt out of Houston Christian, you draft Jeremiah Trotter Jr. out of Clemson, right? You signed Zack Baun to a 1-year deal. You signed Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to a 3-year deal. You brought in Devin White, which didn't really become anything for us. There were so many moves that were made. Isaiah Rodgers finally got his opportunity to play this year, right? So that was kind of a latent decision that came to fruition. I mean, Nakobe Dean took that next step, right? Nolan Smith took that next step. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, they all, Moro Ojomo took that next step, right? There were so many things that happened, but it all comes back to Vic Fangio. So break down what you saw from Vic Fangio throughout this season and how they got to where they were in their Super Bowl and how exactly they held the Kansas City Chiefs, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes offense, how they held them to 0 points going into the third quarter.
Look, I think Fangio is one of those guys that it drives you crazy, right? Because like some of us who coach the game, we hate Fangio's system. It's incredibly difficult to coach. It just is. Like, and I'm very competent in what I do. I started off with special teams. I think I've already told a story before. Like one of the very first guys I ever really coached was Percy Harvin on special teams drill down in Virginia Beach. But to be honest with you, like after that, the next phases where they had me pretty much coaching was cornerbacks and receivers until I got basically worked in with quarterbacks. And it's difficult to teach these too high structured defenses where you're going to match and carry. Like there's an athleticism that has to be there and there's an intelligence that has to be there. There's a technique that has to be done. Some dudes don't like that, bro. Just straightforward, man. You know, some dudes just want to be athletes. Like, hey, man, I'm better than this dude. Let's just man up and play football.
A lot of guys don't want to think out there. They just want to react.
Exactly. So it's really difficult to like, it's not just the players. It's not just the guy who's actually coordinating the defense. It's the position group. It's your position group coaches. And like everyone has to be on the same page. And I think when you look at Vic Fangio, I think when you have a guy that's been in the league as long as he is, man, he's got so many strings that he can pull. He's got so many guys in that Rolodex that he can call upon. You know, the Christian Parkers, right? You know, you just look at these guys, you know, Hurt down on the defensive line. Like the only guy he really couldn't get was he wanted a particular linebacker coach and they had to use Nick's guy. You know, they went to one of Nick's dudes and they got the guy from the Titans that Nick knew.
Bobby King, right?
Bobby King, who was a dang good coach, man. Did a heck of a job, by the way. But let's not make the mistake about it. Where did Vic Fangio make his mark in the league? As a linebacker coach, coaching the Dome Patrol out there in New Orleans. You go back to his 49er teams, man, and what he had rolling out there at the linebacker spot. Like, I mean, this guy's always had a knack for coaching linebackers. He just does. So, like, I think as good as Bobby King was, Vic Fangio was always going to succeed with linebackers. I mean, he's gotten dudes paid in Miami, to be real with you. He got guys paid in Miami. You know, he had a kid that played a similar role to Baun. I think he overhung more because of the injuries on Miami's team in 2023 that it caused them to have to overhang more and play as an edge more than they had to do with, you know, in 2024, what they had to do with Zack Baun, but it's basically the same role. You know, those guys were teammates, by the way. Was it Wisconsin? So, I mean, it's crazy the way that Vic not only can coach his scheme, not only can coach his coaches, but the dude can evaluate talent. You know, I know some of the guys in the comment section probably remember me on Twitter, like telling people like, nah, man, Zack Baun, he's going to be good. That's a good signing.
I said that to people. And,
yeah,
you know, when we signed him, and I'm sorry to cut you off, Gates, but we were in lockstep with that. Because when we signed Baun, when the Eagles signed Zack Baun, I said to myself, I like what I've seen from him. I like what I've heard about him. What I did was, instead of reading the Eagles writers, right, I dove deep into the New Orleans writers to find out what they knew about him. And one of the guys said that this is going to be a piece that they're going to miss because he's a guy that can do damn near everything. Yes, he was drafted, you know, kind of be an overhang, be an edge guy, right? He's very athletic, but when he had his opportunity to start in those final 4 or 5 games for the Saints, I think they were dealing with injuries last season. He was a stat sheet stuffer, right? And in my opinion, the stat sheet stuffer is someone who's able to make an impact in various categories. He had sacks. pass deflections, interceptions, forced fumbles, tackles for loss, tackles. I mean, he was everywhere. He was a very active player. So when you extrapolate that and try to forecast that during his time with the Philadelphia Eagles, you say, okay, if he can find a way to multiply what he's done in those 4 or 5 games, we're going to have a heck of a player. And that's exactly what he did. He was a stat sheet stuffer for the Eagles.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, showed up everywhere and did it all season long. Like one of those pieces to where normally I would, it's a weird thing, right? Because it's like, okay, if we have to pick and choose here, you can't forego Zack Baun. Like if it was any other organization who doesn't have the track record of the Eagles of getting defensive linemen and developing them, then I'd probably say like, no, you got to let Zack Baun walk. It's just easier to get a linebacker and play a linebacker in today's league.
Right.
But because of the fact that we're so successful at what we do in the trenches, it's kind of like, I don't know, man. Like, I mean, how many of us thought that Nolan Smith was done? How many of us thought like all these dudes were done? And then like, no, when they really got their chances and opportunity, man, they really showed up. Like Moro Ojamo. Like it's easy to say Jalen Carter. Like Jalen Carter is going to succeed no matter what the system is. Moro Ojamo doesn't just succeed anywhere. He's got the underlying talent. I called him the biggest steal of the draft that year, but still, I knew that the fit was part of the reason he was the steal. Like I knew that playing inside of this type of system, like where you're going to play a gap and a half, this dude is a pretty good run defender and he's a pretty good pass rusher from the interior. So like when you get a guy like that, like a Moro Ojamo, you can see how well this coaching staff does in terms of developing the talent. This is like it's a crazy situation we're in, Tone, just because like I've never had this amount of players that were important to a team that are up in free agency and never felt so confident that we'll figure it out.
Yeah, that's the part that's a little unsettling a little bit, right? I think even Howie Roseman spoke about this, how this is going to be a very unique offseason than what we're used to, right? This is because you have so many guys that were instrumental who are up to get paid, but you also have so many guys on the roster who are currently under contract, be it a rookie contract or long-term deals, who were instrumental as well. It's almost like you have a good problem. It's a good problem to an extent. You know, you mentioned it, right? Zack Baun, and he's up for a contract, and he should be priority number one. I agree with that 100%. There are other guys who they've priced themselves out of Philadelphia. It's just a reality. Milton Williams is probably going to get between 17 to 21 million a year. These guys are getting, the D tackles at least are getting wide receiver contracts now, right? Josh Sweat probably priced himself out of Philadelphia. The way he played in that Super Bowl, both him and Milton, the way they played in that Super Bowl, how dominant they were. There's a chance that you may see Sweat get between maybe 17 to 20, depending on how things go in the market, right? It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. But in my humble opinion, because I know what I know about Sweat and Milton and how talented they are and how there's a premium on their positions, I wouldn't be surprised if the Philadelphia Eagles prioritize Zack Baun and Mekhi Becton.
So, like, look, when it comes to Josh Sweat, the way I have it read is, like, to begin with, guys, know that I'm a big Josh Sweat fan. This young man played out in the 7.57. He played out there at Smith High School. Just was a young man that was very well known from people in that area. I got a lot of friends that are still out in the 7.57 because I'm a veteran. Still got a lot of friends that are serving out there. They keep up with the high school athletics out there. And they told me before we even drafted Josh Sweat that, hey, man, that young man that's out there at Florida State, hey, man, that dude's a beast, bro. He can play. He's a really good player. But Josh Sweat, when I was doing the comp for him, like the comp that I came away with is Matthew Judon, right? 28-year-old. Last year, Matthew Judon was the hot name, right? Was on the trade block. You knew you had to trade for him. You knew you had to extend him. He was the hot name on the block right before the season started. He got 4 years, 54,500 at about 13.6 AAV, average annual value. Those numbers aren't, they're not what they seem, guys. I mean, the way you structure the contract is far more important than those bottom line numbers, but that's the surface level stuff, guys. That's what I would expect Josh Sweat is probably looking for. I'm not saying he's going to get it. That's what he's probably looking for from his agency. He's probably looking for 4 years, 4 years, somewhere around, 54 or 5, just depends if it's a 3-year contract or 4-year contract, but he wants that probably AAV to be around 13 million. That's what I would assume Josh Sweat is looking for. Now, could we get a hometown discount here in Philly? If you can get it done before the start of free agency, you probably could get him under that number a little bit.
Right.
I don't know that it'll happen now. It's hard to say, right? You don't know how he feels about taking a pay cut from the year prior. Like that's a tricky one. You know what I mean? So if you look at Zack Baun, like where would you comp Zack Baun? For me, this one's a little tougher because of the date of when they did these contracts, but the most recent one is Patrick Queen, which he signed it last year in 2024, right? It was a 3-year, $41 million deal, 13.6 AAV. All right. You got Bobby Okereke signed a 4-year, $40 million deal, which is about a $10 million AAV. I don't think he's going to be in the Tremaine Edmonds area, which is 4 at 72, 18 million AAV. Now, when I say I don't think he's going to be in that value range, Tone, that's assuming he doesn't hit the free market. If he hits the free market, I think he does have an opportunity to get up there. But I think if we can get that deal done before the start of free agency, before the start of the league calendar year, basically, if we can get that done before then, we probably can get it done for essentially around the Patrick Queen deal. So it'd be pretty similar in number to what you would pay Josh Sweat.
So how much are you factoring in? And I'm sure you are, but how much are you factoring in the fact that he's really only shown? Matter of fact, I think the better question is, how much of an impact will the fact that he only has 1 year of a sample size in terms of him playing at this level? Now, granted, it was a hell of a season, and the way he played this year, it's very sustainable. So how much of a role will that 1 year sample size play into his potential contract, be it with the Eagles or be it on the open market?
I think it's a roll of the dice because good teams will take that into consideration, right? Especially when they're coming to the negotiations.
But teams are desperate in free agency.
It's a 1 year track record. Bad teams will make bad decisions and they will overpay. And it just, you don't know what bad teams are going to have that kind of cap space to make that kind of foolish of a move. Now, the one team I'm not saying that they're bad, but I'm just saying that I could see them making a deal like that would have been the Commanders, but the Commanders paid Bobby Okereke. You know what I'm saying? They have Frankie Louvu there if they want to bring him back. I don't know that they would be circling the wagons trying to pick him up, Zack Baun. So I don't know if they would go in that direction. But I mean, I could see a team like that has that kind of cap space. I think Washington's got a steadier front office than they did in previous years. So I'm trying to give them a little grace here to see how they do. I still think
New England has a lot of money as well.
Yeah, I think trading Jahan Dotson inside a division was still kind of foolish. And I also think allowing the Eagles to move up in the draft ahead of you and take Cooper DeJean in hindsight, pretty foolish, if I'm being real. But I do think that they're on better footing than they've clearly been in previous years. I don't know. I'm trying to think in my head, like, who's that team? Who's that team that's stupid and has money? You know what I mean? Like, that's a team you got to watch out for.
That's a good question, right? Let me. Well, while you speak, I'm going to look at the cap space right now because again, you're right. I spoke about this. I'm going to say about a week or two ago that this is the time of the year where desperate teams really show themselves. Free agency is the land of overpaying guys. It's the land of you can't avoid it, and that's why it was so important for Howie Roseman to do what he did this season because he managed to build a roster defensively that is with a bunch of young guys that actually made an impact on rookie deals. And not only did they make an impact, they showed that they can actually play in this league over the extent of a season and they can win their matchups. Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, Jalen Hunt, right? Jalen Hunt had a really good Super Bowl, in my opinion. He had a really good second half of the season when BG got hurt, right? So building your roster with those young players is paramount. But when you're a team that doesn't know how to evaluate talent, you rely heavily on free agency, and that's where the overpayment comes in. So So to your point about teams who aren't good, who don't really make good decisions, but they have a lot of money. Let's go down some of the list of teams who do have the most money. New England. As of right now, they're projected to have well over. This is a lot of money. They're projected to have well over 120 million in cap space. Las Vegas, the Raiders.
Denver would be an interesting team just because it depends on how they feel about their quarterback. I think that they think they got one.
Denver, so they have about 37.3 million in cap space.
Yeah. So if you think you got one at the quarterback position and he's on a rookie contract, now's the time. You know what I mean?
That's true. The top 10 teams as far as cap space: New England 1, Las Vegas 2, Washington 3, Chicago 4, Arizona 5, Chargers 6, Minnesota 7, Cincinnati 8, Pittsburgh 9, Tennessee 10.
So I'll say Cincinnati's conservative and foolish in the wrong direction, the opposite direction. I'll say that the team that like Denver definitely, that's one you kind of got to watch out for. The Raiders are notorious too. That's another organization where I feel like they're trying to make something kind of feel they're trying to force competitiveness there, right? So they might be a team that might try to reach into free agency to drive up some of the, what I mean, some of that, some of that hype machine, if you will, around them.
Right.
They tried it with Devontae Adams, and they tried a few different things. I still think that they're in purgatory until they figure out a quarterback spot. But that's a team that, with a lot of money and an aggressive front office that I don't think cares if they make mistakes. I think that they're more invested in selling tickets. That's a team I definitely. But I guess you can make the argument is like how many tickets is Zack Baun selling?
That's a good
What
point.
I mean?
I mean,
Yeah.
I personally believe he didn't win Defensive Player of the Year because the lack of notoriety surrounding his name. But the football people still gave him first team All Pro at his position, so that counts for something, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's really going to be interesting to see how Howie Roseman constructs this roster post Super Bowl win, right? And Howie Roseman is not someone that I anticipate to ever get comfortable. That's not his mentality ever. He's always looking to push the needle in some shape, way, or form, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about it from the Mekhi Becton perspective, right? What's your take on Mekhi Becton's value, the impact he made on this team, and potentially what he could be looking for a free agency? Do you see a team taking a shot on a guy who is a right guard for 1 year, right? Really has 1 year of really good play. The other years are kind of up and down due to injury. How do you gauge Mekhi Becton's value, not only on the open market, but also in Philadelphia?
That's an excellent question. I think it's going to have to start with the evaluation of, do you see him as an interior O lineman or do you see him as a tackle? Because that's a different pay scale.
Exactly.
I
And
think
me personally, I looked at him as interior, right? At this point in his career, I think it's a shorter distance you have to travel, right? You're not on the island. He's a unicorn at that position because of the size he has and the athleticism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the tough part is like it's really difficult because like if you look at from the run grades, Becton was pretty good. I mean, he wasn't one of the top guys rated there, but if you're watching the internal mechanisms of how our run game worked, Becton was a huge part of it, the physicality that he played with, right? Him and Landon Dickerson and the physicality that those two guys bring, a big part of why we have a lot of success there. Although Landon is highly rated in the run game and Mekhi is rated decently, but he's not like one of the top guys they rated off of PFF. Pass pro was an issue. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. In pass pro, you could tell that he's still learning how to play on the interior. Like I don't think it's a lack of ability. I just think it's a lack of reps there. And there's a lot of communication between the center, understanding how the protections work, understanding how to pick up stunts and twists and things like that. Gains when they run gains on the interior. Like there's definitely some growth that has to happen there. I'll say that, and mind you, I don't think it's because of one player or the other. I think it was the two of them together and growing together. It's going to matter. But I'll tell you right now that the center and the right guard spot were a little bit of a problem in pass protection this year. With that said, you got a guy that was moving from right guard into center who only played a couple years of center in college. You know what I mean? Who's athletically gifted, but is still learning it. And Cam Jurgens. Right. And then you got a guy that was a tackle who's playing inside and is a physical specimen at the position, but is still learning how to play differently. Right? He's learning how to play in a phone booth instead of being out there on an island. You know what I mean? Like there's a difference there. So I mean, I think you have to account for like when you look at things like their ability to pass protect. Like where do you gauge the growth that'll occur? Because they're both still very young players. Even Mekhi Becton, he's a very young player.
What is he? What, 26?
Yeah, he's a young guy. I mean, lineman can play for 26. He can play another 10 to 12 years potentially. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, this is a guy that has not reached what he's going to be ultimately. I think Mekhi has more value in Philadelphia unless another team is going to put him out at right tackle. I think if a team's going to put him out at right tackle, it changes the value proposition. But if they're going to try to play him at right guard, I think his value is higher in Philadelphia than elsewhere. If I had to take a wild guess, Tone, and you don't know how these things are going to shake out, you know what I mean? You don't know agents. You don't, there's a business side of this that you just don't know how they're looking at it. I would take a wild guess that they're probably more likely to sign Zack Baun and Mekhi Becton than Milton Williams and Josh Sweat.
I agree.
Now, I don't think anyone is ruled out yet. I think it's just going to depend on how it all shakes itself out these next week or two in terms of the talks. I don't think anyone is out of the picture yet. But that's, my gut instinct tells me that Mekhi and Zack Baun are more likely, and you might be able to get a third guy. You might be able to get a Milton Williams. You might be able to get a Josh White, just depending on how it works. It just depends upon what guys are willing to work with you on the structure of the contract, because it's the structure more than anything that's going to matter, because you're going to want to basically load as little money on the 2025 year as possible, but picking it up in 2026 a little bit, but more so 27 or 28. That's where you're going to want to put the money at mostly. So that player's got to work with you. It's all nice and it's all shiny when you say 4 years and 60 some million, but it's really about how you're going to do that. Yeah, it's the structure, right? That's what makes us so deadly when it comes to contracts. We got an aggressive GM in Howie Roseman, but we got an owner who's willing to spend the money. What people don't realize is if you guarantee money on a contract, it has to be escrowed. Not every owner can escrow that type of money. Simply put, not every ownership has the ability to do it. And we saw that with
the desire.
Stakes.
There's some ownerships that they can, but they're just cheap.
They won't. Dallas,
Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Yeah. And go ahead, please.
Yeah, but then you talk about bonus money, signing bonus money. That's paid to the player up front, and then you're allowed to allocate it over X amount of years. So Jeffrey Lurie is really the key ingredient to how we're able to do these things, and that's what makes it tough to predict who's going to be here and who's not going to be here. It's really who's willing to work with us, because I have Milton Williams. You tell me what you think. I have Milton Williams kind of around what Ed Oliver got. I think he's going to get a 4-year, $68 million deal somewhere in that area with about a 17 AAV. I think they're similar in age when they signed their contracts. I think their talent level is pretty similar. That's what I see. That's the type of contract I see for him. Now I know some people are I don't know, man, but how the heck did Javon Hargrave, get 20 AAV? And it's because he had this, where Milton got mostly the pressure numbers, Javon got the sack numbers. And I think that sometimes these guys get caught up a little bit in the stat chasing.